Hello everybody and welcome back to another live stream. I'm Barry Darnall and this is my channel, Barry Darnall Art. Thank you for joining me, and tonight I'm going to be just working on some portrait sketches. These aren't going to be really finished drawings. It's really just more of an exercise to practice a couple of different faces, and just it's part of keeping up your skills. So hang on for a second here and let me pull up my first images here. All right. Okay. So I'll be using a couple of different pencils tonight. I'll be using a 4H and, I'm sorry, a 2H and a 4B. And let me bring up my screen here with the drawing. All right. And once again, I'm going to be drawing on newsprint. It's an inexpensive paper. It's perfect for practicing. You're not really worried about doing finished drawings on this. It's just so you can practice and work on your skills, make mistakes. And that's really what it's about, is making mistakes and learning from them. So, all right, well, I'm going to start off here. I'll start laying down some of my construction lines here on the first one that I'm going to do. And I just start off by kind of mapping out the top and bottom of the person's face, okay? And then I'll come about halfway down and mark out a spot there roughly where the eyes are going to be at. And then we'll come down about half of that, and I'll put in roughly where I think their person's nose is going to be at. And these measurements are really loose measurements right now. I'll adjust these as I'm drawing, and I'll start doing some comparisons of different features so I can fine-tune things a little bit. Now that I've kind of got some of these lines in, I'm going to start putting in a little bit of the shape of the person's head. Again, I'm not really worried about being real precise here. I'm just trying to lay something in so I can get an idea of where I'm at. Okay, and all these lines are just basically designed to give me a roadmap and give me some place to work on and figure out what I'm doing. So now I'll start coming in and try and put in a little bit more detail here. We'll get a few of the features worked in. Now, I know every artist is a little bit different. Some artists start with the eyes. A lot of artists will start with the eyes. The eyes are kind of the focal point of the face, so that's where a lot of artists will start to focus their attention at and work on the most. And I'm no different in that regard. I'll do the same thing, but I do try to get away from the eyes at some point and make sure that I'm paying attention to other parts of the face, because it's really easy to spend a lot of time on a person's eyes and you end up with a real nice set of eyes, but not much else. So you really have to get yourself to work around the person's face and lay in all of the different features. And that's basically what we're doing here. And again, a lot of this is going to change. And I can already see that her cheek comes out quite a bit. She's got really pretty high cheekbones. And now I'm going to kind of split the difference between the bottom of the nose and where I think the chin is going to be at, which is going to be about right here. And that should give me pretty much the center line for the mouth right here. That's going to come in about right there. And that's going to come in about right there. Again, a lot of this I'll come in. I'm just kind of getting things in here. I'll come in and change a lot of this, fine tune a lot of this as I'm going along. We'll come back up here and I'll work across this. Try and map out some of this part of her face here. She's looking rather angry right now, and she's definitely not an angry looking person in the photograph that I'm working from. So, and the photograph that I'm working from, by the way, I want to mention is a photograph that I have downloaded from a website called unsplash.com. Unsplash is a really great website if you're looking for reference photos to draw from for practice, but also for using for finished pieces. The photographers share their work on that particular site, and they allow people to use their images without any copyright concerns. So it's a great place to get a lot of variety in reference material, a lot of different photographers. And they've got a lot of things. They've got portraits, they've got wildlife, they've got still life, landscapes. It's a pretty diverse site and a lot of really talented photographers on there. So if you're looking for source material, I would definitely recommend going out and paying them a visit and seeing what they have available. All right, now I can kind of figure out where her hairline is at here. A little bit more accurately than what I had. And another nice thing about working with graphite and doing your construction lines real light like this is I can come in pretty quickly and I can erase things down pretty much to the paper. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort to get things changed. So, like I was saying earlier, this is really just kind of sketching and practicing to keep my skills somewhat current, and it's also a good way to learn about different things. You can learn different ways of holding your pencil, different ways of putting down your lines, different ways of constructing a person's portrait. I've pretty much got her mapped out here. I'm not really exaggerating her hair. Her hair in the photograph is actually pretty large. She's got a ton of hair. And it really, my drawing unfortunately is not going to do her justice in that regards probably at this point. But I would definitely say this young lady's got a very full head of hair going on. Okay. So I'm going to chuckle right now. My wife is kind of being my conscience here right now. She let me know that I was being quiet and I wasn't talking. And so I'll try and talk a little bit more. So, I find when I'm drawing, I'll talk for a little bit, but then I'll get so caught up in what I'm working on that I just kind of lose track of myself and focus on the drawing. And that's a big part of what I like about drawing. Is it is really to me it's a great way to relax. You can get so focused on what you're doing. It's almost a form of meditation, I would say. And I know other artists I've talked to have made similar observations that you just get lost in the work, and it's really easy to do. And it's actually, to me, it's a great way to burn off stress of the day, and you can just kind of tune out everything except for what you're working on at that very moment, and it's kind of nice. So it's probably one of the best forms of therapy that you can get yourself that doesn't cost you a whole lot of money to get. And I think it's pretty effective. I'm sure I have a few family and friends that would tell me I need to get my money back because it's not working all that well, but I think it's okay. I think I'm doing fine. So you can see now what I'm doing is I'm coming in, I'm starting to fill in more detail. I'm starting to put in some of the shades, the different shadow forms and things like that. And you can see that the face is starting to develop a little bit more here as I'm doing that. And I'll come back in here in a little bit with some of this, and I'm going to end up erasing some of this out because a lot of this, there's highlights in here that I need to get in that will help to define her facial features a lot more than what they are right now. And let's get some shadow around her eye here. We'll get her eye a little bit more defined over here than what it has been. So as I'm laying in the shadows, I'm trying to keep in mind what's going on here with the shadows. And if you keep in mind that like the eye it's a ball. I mean, it's basically a ball. So it's going to have the same kind of shapes as a ball. So you'll have your ball here like this. And if the light is coming down from this side, you're going to have your shadows here, okay? But in the case of an eye, you've also got this shelf, which is the eyebrow hanging over it. So that's going to cast a shadow down over the ball, but on the parts of the ball where it's rounded, that shadow is going to follow the curvature of the eyeball. So what you're seeing here is where it's got that curvature coming up and then underneath the ridge of the brow. And in a larger drawing, that would definitely be a lot more pronounced. With the small sketch like this, it's hard to get that much detail in it. But you still have to get it in there, because if you don't get it in there, then the eye is not going to look like an eye. Those shadows are really, really important towards making that happen. Now we'll come in here and define her nose a little bit. Get some of that shape incorporated here. Shade this down a little bit more over here. All right, and let's get the side of her face lightly shaded in here. That is where the light's coming kind of above and down here. And she's got a little bit of a cast shadow underneath her jaw on the very bottom edge. But there's light reflecting back up in here from somewhere. The photographer may have had a reflector down here pushing some light back up into her face. So we'll try and get that in there a little bit. And now we can start blocking in some of her hair over here. And again, right now in her hair, I'm not worried about putting in a whole lot of detail. I just need to get the general mass of her hair blocked in. And you generally don't want to wait too long when you're doing a portrait before you start blocking in the hair, especially if it's dark hair, like what this young lady has, because as you lay in this dark tone around the face, what you're going to see is it causes the shadows and stuff that you've drawn in here to start appearing lighter. If you put a shadow next to a lighter shadow, that lighter shadow is going to look lighter as the darker shadow gets darker. And it's something that you kind of have to learn the hard way. I've done a lot of drawings over the years where I've worked on all the details, and you really got a lot of what I thought was really nice shading going on in a drawing. And then I start blocking in a large shadow shape like this, or a large dark area like this young lady's hair. And then all of a sudden, all of the tones and everything that I've drawn in the main subject are too light. And that can be really hard to go in and start trying to darken those to get those to a decent value. And here's a good example of what I'm talking about. I laid some tone in here on her forehead where she's got a shadow that's kind of coming in here on her forehead. And when I first laid it in, I kind of backed off because it looked pretty dark against nothing but white background. Now that I've gotten some of this tone in here in her hair, I'm seeing where I'm way too light on that shadow, and I need to kind of darken that up so that it stands out against the shadows that I'm putting into her hair. And we'll get a little bit more in here in the deepest, darkest parts of her hair. Okay, and we'll kind of work on this side over here a little bit. We'll get some of the tone laid in over here. Now it's lighter up in here because there's the light coming down on top of her head. So I'll just start by getting just some light tone laid in here. Again, like I said, I'm not worried about trying to get in a bunch of detail at this point. I just want to get the tone laid in. All right, now I'll come in and lay in some of my darker tones in here. And again, this is all, the entire mass of her hair over here is generally pretty dark. There's areas that are just absolutely pitch black, and then there's other areas like right in here that are kind of a mix of light and dark. But I want to try and lay in the general mass areas that are dark. now that's telling me that her face over here is too light. I need to bring in a little bit more shadow into this side of her face. Okay, and I'm gonna switch my pencil here. I've been working with the 2H pencil there, which is a lighter pencil. Now I'm going to come in with a 4B pencil. And the 4B pencil, the lead on this is a softer lead. So it's going to put down a little bit darker value than what the other pencil is putting down. So I can darken up some of these areas a little bit easier. Although granted, on this paper, it's a little bit limited, but I should be able to get some of it darkened down enough that I can get some of my variety that I'm looking for. And I'll darken up her eyes a little bit here, just so they stand out a little bit more. There we go. I'm going to work on trying to thin her face out a little bit here. I got a little bit too broad in her face, so I can kind of bring that in with what I'm doing here with her hair. And correct that a little bit. And we'll pull down some shadow in here. Fill this in. Now at this point, again, this is just a sketch, but if I were going to be working on a finished drawing where I was going to spend a lot of time on this, one of the things I would start doing now would be to start coming in with an eraser, and I'd start pulling out some of these areas here where I've dropped in the shadow, and essentially what I'm doing is using the eraser to draw back in highlights that I may have just covered over. And you can put a lot of texture into a drawing this way. And I can get in here clean up some of my construction lines in here a little bit. And now I've got a couple of areas where there's some highlights that need to come in, like here on the bottom edge of her chin. She's actually got a pretty nice highlight down here. So I'll use the eraser to kind of try and pull that back in a little bit. And a little bit of a highlight down under here. And she's got a little bit of a highlight in her face right in here. I can pull back in. And then we'll work on some of the highlight areas over here. All right, so that's pretty much my first sketch that I'm going to work on. I'm probably going to stop right there. Anything else I would do with it would be trying to get involved in actually finishing a drawing, and that's really not the point of what I'm doing here. I'm really just trying to spend some time sketching some faces and practicing a few things. So we will stop on that one there. And let me go to another image here. Just bear with me. Okay. All right, so the next photograph that I'm going to work on, or the next drawing I'm going to work on, is another photograph from Unsplash. It's by a gentleman named Mikhail Rakitiansky, and we will see what we can do with this one for a little bit here. You know what? Let me hang on for a second here, and let me go out. I have not checked to see what's going on out here for a while. I've got a couple people perhaps on here. All right. So it's saying I've got 4 viewers on here right now. I'm trying to see if I can figure out who some of those people are. Hey, if you're out there watching the video, my live stream, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate the support. And if you want to throw a question in the chat window, I will try and catch it and answer your question. And definitely, if you would, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Hit the like button and the notification bell, and you'll be notified anytime I'm posting a new video or setting up a new live stream. And I'd truly appreciate it. I'm trying to start this channel and grow the channel, and anything you can do to help me out with it would be really, really appreciated. All right, so, okay, well, let me get back here to our drawing. Okay, make sure I've got the right pencil here. There we go. Okay. And again, I'm doing the same thing. I'm marking kind of the top portion of the head, the bottom portion of the head. And by doing it this way, this is what lets you manage how large your drawing is going to be. One of the things a lot of new artists, especially people that are just starting to work on portraits, will find out is that they tend to start drawing in the eyes, and then their drawing expands out from there. And that's where you'll see a lot of people, and I've done it, can't even count how many times. You end up with a great set of eyes, and then all of a sudden, you know, here's your the page that you're working on, your eyes are here and here and they look great, but then your head is completely cut off by all of the paper. And it's because you've drawn from the center of the picture out instead of kind of defining what the dimensions of your portrait are going to be from the outset. So, this is one method of doing it, is to mark your top and bottom marks. Generally speaking, the nose is going to be approximately halfway. The nose. The center line of the eyes is going to be approximately halfway between the top of the head and the bottom of the chin. And so you can kind of start off like that to lay that in. And then the nose is generally going to be halfway between the eye line and the chin. And you can put that in. And you're just giving yourself markers to try and help define what you're drawing here. And then the mouth is going to be halfway, the center line of the mouth is going to be approximately halfway between the bottom of the nose and the bottom of the chin. So if I throw that in there, okay, that then defines a lot of the dimensions. Now I can tell you on this person that I'm drawing here, it's a picture of an older gentleman and he's got a beard. So I'm estimating his chin is right here, is about right there, but his beard's going to end up coming down into this area, somewhere in there, when I'm done. Right? So we've got the dimensions there, and we'll just kind of start throwing in a little bit of the shape here, some of the shapes of his eyes. We'll get some of that thrown in. We'll get one of his eyes started up here. And again, I'm not worried about putting in a whole bunch of the detail yet. And a lot of what I'm doing is just estimations of where things go. And a lot of my lines will change pretty dramatically sometimes in a drawing from where I started. A lot of times where you put those initial lines down, you end up finding out you're way off. Your accuracy sometimes leaves a lot to be desired, and you'll find out that you are quite a ways off on where different features in the face are at. Now this gentleman, like I said, he's an older gentleman. He's got a lot of interesting lines in his face. And some of those lines are actually what I'm going to have to use as some of my markers here in drawing him. Just trying to figure out roughly where his nose is going to end up at. And as I'm putting these marks down, I'm comparing a lot of things. I'm comparing the position, for example, of the side plane of his nose to where his eye's at. I'm trying to establish some of the structures of his nose as well. But I'm trying not to go into too much detail at this point, because that can get you kind of in a bind. You'll end up committing to lines, and sometimes you'll convince yourself, you'll just be so convinced that what you've got laid down is right that you kind of talk yourself out of doing what actually is right. And I feel like that's what I've done up here with this eye. I feel like maybe I've not gotten that quite right, but I'm not going to remove it just yet. I'm going to stick with what I've done for the moment. And then if I get a little bit further on here with some of my lines and my details, I may revisit that a little bit and reconfigure what I've done there. Now I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it comes out. So doing these drawings during a live stream, I'm really thinking this is going to be a good exercise for me actually to do this. It's going to kind of force me to move a little bit quicker with my drawings than what I normally would do when I'm drawing. I'm one of those people that is probably a slow drawer. I don't get things down on paper. I don't think I could ever be like a caricature artist at a fair or somebody who does the portraits at the fair. I probably wouldn't get a whole lot of portraits done during the course of a day with as slow as I tend to put things on paper. All right, so let's get some of this down here. All right. Yeah, I'm thinking now as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking I may have been talking myself out of something that was actually better than what I thought it was. He's a little bit balding on the top. His hair is a little bit thinner, so he's going to have a fairly high hairline here. We want to come down here. We'll use his wrinkles as kind of a measuring tool to get us out to this side of his head. There we go. All right, so this is taking shape okay here. Fairly happy with that. I need to get this side of his face laid in. Now see, like the young lady had fairly high cheekbones in the other drawing. This gentleman, because he is an older gentleman, his face is, the skin kind of pulls down from his cheekbones quite a bit. So instead of having the curvature up here, it falls down in this area down here quite a bit. So we'll get that. All right. And this is kind of the bottom of his chin. Right in here. All right. There we go. And so with his beard coming down, it ends up coming down somewhere in this area, right in there. All right. So I'm being told that I need to show the picture that I'm drawing. Unfortunately, I did not get that loaded into the software soon enough this evening to be able to share that with you, but I will make sure in the future I do that. And for anybody who tuned into my live stream last week, that was actually my first official live stream, and I am definitely going through a learning process. As you're looking at this, if you tuned in last week, if you can compare how the images are looking compared to how they looked last week, I've gotten a couple of different cameras that I'm toying around with, and I'm using a different software package than what I had last week. So I'm hoping that those things will help to improve the quality of the production. But if you get a chance and you can leave me some comments, let me know how that's looking. I would really appreciate it. Any feedback I can get to do a better job, make this more interesting and entertaining and valuable to people, I definitely want to figure out what that is that I need to do. And your feedback is definitely helpful. Both positive and critical feedback. You gotta know what's not working in order to fix it and make it work. All right, so this is one of those cases where my lines and everything are, I think my construction was a little bit off on several points. So I think that's throwing me off on what I'm looking at here, but we'll try and see if we can muddle through it. And one of the things that happens, and it can be kind of deceiving as you're drawing, is when you're doing just the construction lines and you're putting in, kind of the envelope that you're going to be drawing inside of, it can look bigger, wider, for example, than what it is. Once you actually start throwing in your values and you start putting in your lights and darks in here, throwing in your shadows, then all of a sudden a lot of this will look a lot different than what it looks like when you start. Areas that may look like they're too wide will start to narrow up because you're filling them in with value. And as you fill areas in with value, and as you start to put in the value that's going to define the shape of this area, you'll start to see that this takes on a completely different appearance in terms of how wide or narrow perhaps that it looks. So I'm going to get some of this value thrown in here, and hopefully that will answer some of my questions that I've got now about my construction lines and how accurate or inaccurate my drawing is. And I can also start getting the shape of this gentleman's nose defined a little bit here. And I'm thinking that's part of what's throwing me off is some of these shapes that I need to get some value into are probably throwing me off a little bit. Now on this eye here, like I said, I felt like it wasn't necessarily right. But I think it may have to do with exactly what I'm talking about. The values need to be in there to make this work. Yeah, see, I think as I'm getting some value in around his eye, it's starting to fit a little bit better. Some of the things that I was concerned about are starting to make sense, and they're starting to kind of pull together for me here. It's got a really dark value underneath this eye that I'm not really capturing quite right at this point. All right. So we'll start trying to capture some of that. Got his eyelid here, and he's got a fairly dark shadow coming off of his eyelid here. And then some fairly dark values up in here. Some lighter stuff up in here. Let me go, and I think I hear some messages popping across here. All right, let me take a look here. Okay, I've got someone asking what I mean by values. So what I'm talking about by values, value is nothing more than light and dark. Okay, so if you draw a scale and you just draw a line basically top to bottom here, okay, and if at the top what you've got is your light, and down at the bottom what you've got is your pure black, so then everything in between here would have a slightly different tone or a slightly different level of darkness. So as you come in here, okay, that's a darker value. That's a darker value. That's a darker value. And you just keep taking that down. And at some point I need to actually go to a different pencil because the value I can get with the one pencil is a little bit too light. I can get a darker value with this pencil. And then I can come in here and I can get even a darker value with this pencil. So my values are going from a completely dark value down here at the bottom up to lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter values up until I finally get to white. And that's what I'm looking at in here when I'm talking about value. I'm looking at the dark values in here around his eye on the inside of the eye. The dark values actually in his eye here. Okay. And then I'm trying to look and see what those values are compared to the other values in the image. And in the process of doing that, I'm trying to balance these out and define the shapes. And that's what the values, the shadows define the shape of whatever it is you're drawing, whether it's a ball, whether it's a block, or whether it's a face. The shadows are what are going to really define that. They tell you that this is the top of a cheek, and this is the underside edge of a cheek where the person's, line coming down from their nose to their mouth is at. It tells you how much light is coming in here and how much the person's head is turned one way or another. And all of that is basically described by the values that you're laying down. You can do it. You can do a drawing just purely out of line, and you can basically insinuate a lot of value with just lines. One of the things I used to do a lot was contour drawings, where that's basically what you did, was you tried to define the shape of an object with nothing but lines, and you would use those lines to show where the form went and how it went from here to here, and then you could use those lines to try and define the actual shadow areas and light areas of an object. If I take a line here like this, and a line like this, and a line like this, and a line like this, those are all fairly evenly spaced, and it actually creates a value. It creates a tone. If I come in here and I put another line in here and another line in here, now I'll put one more down here. Now you can see I'm going from a lighter value here to a darker value here. If I come in again and I put another line in here and another line in here and another line in here, it's creating a darker tone yet. And so you can create lightness and darkness by just putting down lines. And it's called a contour line when you're doing a contour drawing, but you can also do cross hatching, where instead of just doing lines parallel, I could then come in and I could put lines on top of that. And you could do hatching and cross hatching to define the darker areas of a drawing. So you can see I'm getting darker and darker the more lines I put down. Okay. And I'm essentially accomplishing the same thing there as what I'm accomplishing here, except here I'm laying down a continuous tone on the paper. So I'm accomplishing essentially the same effect here as what I'm accomplishing here, just in a different way. I've done drawings that are nothing but contour lines, and it's an interesting way to draw it. It's challenging, but you can get a really good effect out of it too, with the right subject and the right treatment of it. You can come up with some really nice drawings. All right, now I'm going to try and bring in a little bit of the lines of his face here. I want to be careful with these. All right, and we'll put this down. And we're going to come across here to try and lay in some of this tone and shadow in here. And I think what was happening here, like I said earlier, I wasn't sure that what I had on this eye was right. And I think that it probably was more right than I realized. I just needed to get that tone, some shadows and stuff laid in there so that it started to make sense. I think I had the basic structure right. It just, until you get certain things in place so that you can see it a little bit more the way it's going to finish, it's hard to judge sometimes. And I think that's what I was running into there. And we'll get some of the tone in here. And now I'm going to start coming in and see if I can get this eye laid in a little bit more completely here. So I almost think this eye here, that maybe he's got a kind of an issue with the lid of his eye over here, and that may also be affecting what I'm seeing and the way I'm laying it down. It would be something that if I were going to do a lengthier study of this gentleman, I would probably spend quite a bit of time measuring and comparing on that particular part of his face to try and figure out exactly what was going on. So, and older people are definitely can be more of a challenge sometimes to draw drawings of, because they do have so many lines in their face, and sometimes the lines in a person's face can actually be more important than the tone. It's, you know, those lines sometimes are what really give the person's face the character that it has. And you know, if you're spending too much time trying to capture that perfect tone, you may be missing what's actually giving that person their particular look. And that's just all part of what you learn, you know, as you are doing more and more drawings and you're spending more and more time observing. You'll start to pick out those things and know what you should emphasize and what you need to perhaps pay less attention to in a drawing. There are, you know, some people they're very proud of the lines in their face, and they, you know, they've earned those lines in their mind, and so, you know, I think they personally, you know, will do things in the way they carry themselves and the way they present themselves and the way they smile. All of that geared towards, you know, emphasizing those lines in their face. And you get some people, they just, I mean, the character of their face is just so expressive, and you know, the laugh lines and the wrinkles just kind of add to that degree of character that the person has. We're getting over here. So now as I'm looking at this, I'm less bothered by what I was concerned about earlier. As I've laid in some tone and stuff here, I'm realizing I probably was pretty good on my construction lines. The dimensions of his face are pretty accurate, I think, at this point. And we can start to do some stuff here to kind of bring in his details of his mustache a little bit. And as I'm coming in here working on the details of his mustache, I don't want to get too carried away with trying to draw the individual hairs of his mustache. You know, right now I just want to suggest them. If I was going to finish rendering this out, I would get in here and I would do a lot more work with drawing in shade, then erasing out individual areas of hairs to create the lighter areas, and then coming back in again and redrawing darker areas, and it all creates that representation of his beard and his face. Okay, and we'll come back down here. And we'll wrap this down here a little bit. I'm just trying to put in a little bit of his shirt collar here to define this area, create a little bit of frame and context for his image. All right. And we'll get a little bit of the shadow area up here on his temple put in. We'll try and get a little representation of his hair in here. Ears are another interesting thing to draw. I mean, everybody's got surprisingly interesting and very individual ears. I mean, the structures are all fundamentally the same, but they definitely do change as a person ages. Some people have more pronounced lobes. Some people have more pronounced inner ears and folds. It definitely, as people get older, then again, the wrinkles come into play, and it will change the shape of a person's ear pretty dramatically at times. You get people that have injuries that they have incurred over their lifetime, and that will change the shape of the ear, give it some interesting dynamics. And we'll just kind of get this defined over here. A little bit on his forehead to show where his hairline is receding a bit. Get a few of his forehead wrinkles in here. Those definitely pronounced on this gentleman in places. And there we go. So I think that probably will do it for that sketch there. And I think that'll probably do it for this live stream. Thanks again, everybody, for joining me. I appreciate you tuning in if you did. Again, please, if you would subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell. And let me know what you thought about the live stream. Let me know what you thought about the drawings. And let me know if there's other things you'd like me to demonstrate or show, or different types of drawings you'd like me to do. And I will do my best to see what we can do to include those in live streams. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. And again, I hope you enjoyed what I did. And please tune in again when I do my next live stream or one of my other productions. Have a good night.